bank, what's it gaining? 1% interest. Right. But on the other hand, with the banksters, if you're paying them $1.7 billion, you owe them $1.7 billion, you're paying 7% interest. So it's a loss of 6%. So take that money and pay it down. $1.7 billion. The next thing you do is you have an austerity program. I've mentioned earlier that capital improvement program, $7.9 billion over 6 years. You take part of that, and instead of building planters down the middle of the road, instead of beautification projects in the Maggie Daley parks, instead of those things, and that Riverwalk project, instead of those things, you take $500 million and you pay down the debt. So you're now at $2.2 billion paid down already in 1 year. The next thing you do is you make it possible for more people to bid on contracts, and we'll talk about exactly how you do that. You make it possible for more people to bid on city contracts, and the more people bidding on anything, the lower the price goes. Because somebody will say, I'll do it for $100,000. Somebody will say, I'll do it for $99,000. Somebody will say, I'll do it for $98,000. So the more people you have bidding on a contract, the lower the price goes. As a result, you can save another $600 million in just 1 year in Chicago. So now you got $2.8 billion to set aside and pay down that debt. If you do that over a period of 4 years, you will be pay as you go. You will no longer have to go to the banks to borrow money and pay that debt service. Why don't they do that in Chicago? Because it's the bankers, the mortgage bankers, people who give us our general obligation bonds, our municipal bonds, our revenue bonds, and charge us interest. They fund Ron Emanuel's campaign. They fund Governor Quinn's campaign. They fund Tony Preckwinkle's campaign. Whoever's in power, they fund their campaign because they don't want people like me coming in and taking away their fat meat. Because I'm going to end them getting that debt service from the people of the city of Chicago. It doesn't cost me a dime to do that. It doesn't cost you anything for me to do that. The only losers are the bankers. We become self-sufficient. We're now able to really develop programs that matter. We're able to pay off our pension obligation. $500 million, that's nothing. We can pay that off because we're no longer giving $1 billion a year to the banksters. And it reduces property taxes. It reduces property taxes because our burden isn't as great to have the same level of service in the city of Chicago, and nothing that I've suggested will reduce the level of services in Chicago. Yes?
My question is, you have these different agencies that control Park District,
Park District, you have the Chicago Public Schools that the mayor appoints the board on and controls. You have the Water District, you have the Metropolitan Pier Authority, and several other small, like the PICS. You have several other small agencies that the mayor controls.
So do they have budgets?
Yes, they have huge budgets. When you consider all of the budgets in Chicago, it's about $20 billion under the mayor's control. Now that has nothing to do with the commerce. When you consider our economy in Chicago, it's almost $1 trillion a year, much of which is impacted by the mayor because the economic development programs come out of the mayor's office. So, people don't get it. They think when you're electing the mayor, it's just a popularity contest and it's about one job. It's much bigger than that. When you elect the mayor then has to appoint thousands of people. Excuse me. The mayor then has to appoint thousands of people into policy-making and decision-making positions. There was a time when there was diversity in city government and in the Park District and in Chicago Public Schools. We no longer have that. So that means that's money taken out of our community silently. So people think that you elect the mayor as one job. No, the mayor creates millionaires and turns millionaires into billionaires. So that's what we're missing. That's what is taking place when you see people giving Rahm Emanuel millions of dollars to run his campaign because they don't want to lose the advantage that we have. So we need people who are highly motivated self-starters who want to change their lives and change their children's lives and the lives of their children's children. To get involved in this campaign and take ownership and say, yes, we're going to let Doc mayor, but I want to be part of that administration. I want to help enact policies that are good for our community because I have plenty to offer. The mayor can't do it alone. We as a community don't really understand that. They try to tell us that it's about a personality. Oh, it's just a personality. No, it's about programs. It's about policies. It's about practices. It's about procedures. It's about stopping the police from arresting our children and sending them to jail. Because when a child is arrested, who has to go see about it? We do. Our lives are interrupted. So it's not just the child, it's the whole family. We're off base as a result of the policies that they have. Yes.
What do you feel? What are your thoughts?
This is our last question, by the way.
Okay. What are your thoughts on this new lakeside development?
Glad you asked that. New lakeside development is a 600-acre project. They expect to spend about $4 billion over the next 25, 40 years. And you know it's a good time span. My first concern is they said they're extending Lakeshore Drive to that property. So that means that they have to take some of South Shore. Lakeshore Drive is not some small measure undertaking. That's a huge 3 to 6 lane highway, 3 on each side, easily. So that means they need more space. They have to take some property for that. Maybe they're going to take part of the golf course, the old South Shore Cultural Center. Maybe they're going to take some of those houses that sit there. But then it has to turn, and they have to take more. So that's my first concern. Second concern is community impact. Will the people who are burdened most by that project benefit from it? So what's the community benefits agreement? We have to ask that question. We also need to know who's going to help build it. We have to ask who's going to help build it. I told you all earlier that we need to engage more contractors in the process. How do you do that? First thing is you unbundle the contracts and make them smaller. Because currently they have huge contracts, $300 million. And the only people that can bid on them are Kenny, McHugh, Walsh, O'Neill. None of our contractors, because our contractors are emerging contractors. So you unbundle those contractors. And rather than having one contract that's $300 million, you may have 10 contracts that are $30 million. Now more people can bid on that project. You provide wrap-up, bonding, and insurance. Because bonding and insurance is one of those things, come on here. It's one of those things that prevents people from qualifying to bid. Bonding works like this. You have a bond level that's been established. And you can encumber your bond. But once it's encumbered, it remains encumbered until you complete your portion of the work. So, you may have 5 community projects going, and you're at bond maximum. You can't then bid on those city projects, but if the city provides wrap-up bonding and insurance, now you can bid on that project because the city is not going to ask you for your bond. They're providing bond, wrap-up bonding and insurance. Illegal project labor agreements. We have to eliminate those. Those say that the unions can hire, but they're only hiring from their union hall. People can't just show up at the work site and say, hey, I'm well qualified, I'm a union member, but not out of your hall, I want some of this work. So people in our community are excluded because of that. You also have to have protege-mentor relationships that are transparent, not front contracts. Transparent protege-mentor relationships so that these emerging companies don't make the same mistakes that the big companies have already made. So you ought to be able to dialogue with them. You ought to also be able to rent equipment and not be required to own that equipment. Because if you own a piece of equipment that's worth $3 million, you're no longer considered to be a small business under SBA rules. So you lose your standing. So these are just some of the things that we need to do to ensure that people are ready and able to work on a project like that. That's a massive project.
Yes.
The schools in those communities. We want to make sure that the money does not come from the schools that are underfunded already in the city of Chicago. Like Ron was talking about building that school that he was going to name Obama School. And first thing is, you can't, under Chicago law, name a school after somebody who's living. So they had to retract that. That's common knowledge. They didn't know that. We paying them to do what? So that project has potential, but we want to make certain that the people who are most impacted by it benefit from it. Additionally, Chicago has plenty of room for growth. Those vacant lots, when they said in Inglewood, for example, they were going to give them away for $1, there were a lot of stipulations. You had to pay the existing taxes on them. You know, they had all kind of restrictions. So as a result, you don't see anybody owning those things. Plus, they know that if you got a house that you can barely afford to pay for, they give you that house for $1. Only thing you can put on is a garden. You're not going to prove it. And that's not going to generate revenue. And as a result, that community is going to continue to tolerate. I rode through there yesterday. Board up house after board up house, vacant lot, board up house, vacant lot. That's what's happening in our community. So we've got to stop the slide. This election is critical. There is no more important election than this mayor's race. Because our numbers, I'm talking about the numbers of not just people, but black people, have dwindled. They tore down the projects, gave people Section 8 to move to Indiana and to the suburbs. As a result, enrollment in schools went down. So they took those schools and justified it. They closed down our mental health clinics. They gave us red light cameras. They gave us traffic zone cameras. They started writing more tickets because of these requirements that you pay to park in park district land. These parking meters, they're expanding them contrary to the law. Initially they had a fixed number. They gave them more. We have a fix for the parking meter situation, for the red light cameras. I don't want to take all of the time because we're at a event, and I appreciate our hosts for having us here. Give them a round of applause, please. I'll come back. I'll come anywhere. We have a goal in this campaign. 5 stages to a campaign. Management, message, money, media, and manpower in that order. When it comes to management, we're the best. Absolutely. All you have to do is take a look at our organizational chart. Take a look at how we describe the functions. Take a look at how we've begun to really reach out to people. And our outreach has gone really well under Jerome Williams' leadership. But most importantly, the size of our organization has doubled in the last week. A lot of people who were supporting Karen Lewis have decided to come over to our campaign. So we're thankful for that. That brings challenges. So I contributed $25,000 of my money to the campaign so that we're able to receive those persons and direct their involvement for the benefit of everybody. We have primarily a volunteer army of people who love this city and want to see change and want to be a part of something monumental, new, and different.